Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Councilmember Schroman Warren.
Good evening. I'm virtual.
Councilmember Schwab.
Here.
Councilmember Suggs.
Here.
Manager West.
Present.
Attorney Bloor.
I'm also present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. If you can all please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are doing a special proclamation this evening, recognizing Veterans Day, and we have some guests in the audience. They're not really guests, but they're guests to the council meeting. We have some city staff who are here who are veterans, and I'm hoping you will all come and join me up front to jointly receive the proclamation. And I'm going to put you on the spot for just a minute. If you can introduce yourself, what department you work in or where you work within the city. And if you want to tell us just a little bit about your service, we'd love to hear about it. So I'm going to pass this down so we all know who you are before I read the proclamation. Start with you, Alex.
Hello, Alexander Jones. I work for the Parks and Recreation Department. I've served with the National Guard proudly for 6 years now, and I'll continue on with that service.
Vince McIntyre, civil engineer. I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. Served with 4th Landing Support Battalion out of Fort Lewis. Attached with 2nd LAD out of North Carolina. Served tour in Iraq and retired in 2009.
Angel Torres, I'm an associate planner here in the Community Economic Development Department, and I served 8 years as an infantryman in the Army.
Thank you all for your service. And I will read the proclamation, and then we can thank you again. A proclamation in recognition of Veterans Day 2025. Whereas November 11th has long held a cherished place in the hearts of Americans. From the inauguration of this treasured holiday in 1918, Americans have recognized the sacrifices made by our military. And whereas originally known as Armistice Day, Day of Peace after World War I, President Wilson declared November 11th to be a day of reflection. And now we reflect on those who have served our country and those who continue to serve, including active service members from our own Port Angeles community, for the love of country and dedication to duty. Americans veterans have endured adversity, loneliness, fatigue, loss, and made many other incredible sacrifices. And whereas with their selfless sacrifice, the armed forces have forged and defended the very idea of America, a promise of freedom and equality, democracy and justice, possibility and hope. We owe them a debt, an incredible debt that can never fully be repaid. And whereas this year, the City of Port Angeles wishes to provide a special recognition to staff who have served our country. May your service always be remembered and your sacrifice never forgotten. We thank you for answering the call of duty. And whereas the city is grateful for those who have served our great nation and those who continue to answer the call of service through their essential work as the City of Port Angeles employees. Often humble regarding their time in the armed forces, these silent heroes are crucial for maintaining public services, community infrastructure, and local quality of life. They ensure the daily functioning of the city through jobs in nearly all departments across the organization. And whereas, furthermore, the City of Port Angeles has among its citizens volunteers and individuals who have served in the United States Armed Forces, and we are reminded of our obligation to them to serve our veterans as they have heroically served us. And as we gather here today, let us not forget that freedom is never free, and our nation and our community is ever more indebted for their courageous service. Now, therefore, I, Kate Dexter, Mayor, on behalf of the City Council of Port Angeles, do hereby urge all citizens to join me in giving thanks to all of America's veterans who have placed our nation's security before their own lives, creating a debt that we can never fully repay. With great appreciation, we extend our thanks to those who have bravely served our country, among them the past and present employees of the City of Port Angeles. Our veterans represent the best of America, and they deserve the best America can give them. So thank you very much. And thank you for coming tonight. All right. Thank you. We will continue with our first late items and then public comment. Are there any late items from staff?
Mayor and Council, no late items from staff this evening.
Thank you. Are there any late items from council? All right, I don't hear any. So I don't, Carrie's going to grab the sign up sheet. We do have, this is our public comment period. First public comment period is items on tonight's agenda. And I just want to point out for folks who are here, we do have two public hearings tonight, one on budget revenue sources and the other on property tax. And those comments will be reserved, if that's what you're here to talk to us about, those comments should be reserved for the public hearing. I will pull up the sign up sheet now. Excellent. All right, so we will, I have some sign up. We will do council chambers first and then go online if there's anyone. If you are joining us online and wish to speak at public comment, please raise your virtual hand. As a reminder, your name and whether or not you're a resident. And if you're in council chambers, the timer lights will keep track of your 3 minutes for you. And we will go ahead and start with the folks on the list. So Cheryl Willie. Yeah, you need to come up to the, okay, so are all four of you for items not on the agenda? Okay, so that'll be our second public comment period. So thank you. I will put that aside. It's hard to say. We have, I'm gonna guess around 8, if I had to guess. Yeah, that may be, I'm gonna aim for 8. That's my, after the public hearing, we'll have a better sense, I think. And then in council, John, go ahead and come up. If you haven't signed up, you can still speak.
Hi, John Ralston, City of Port Angeles resident. J2, signal controller, been continued to November 18th. I'm sure you, with your memories, know that I've been bringing this up for many months. I hope the city will contact me for a little tour of the town and the lights. And unless there's some direction of correcting these things, I certainly hope the council does not approve final payment on the 18th unless there's some awfully good reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
There's going to be a second comment.
There is a second public comment period, yes.
Just for the two presentations.
There is a public hearing, yes. Okay, so we were, let's see. Should I go to, so yeah, I know. But I was going to rearrange potentially a little bit. Let's do consent and then I may move an item up for us to discuss. So if we can do, sorry, I was thinking ahead of myself. Anything anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, anything anyone would like to add to the consent agenda? All right, then I will read the consent agenda. The City Council minutes of October 7th, 2025 and October 21st, 2025. Expenditure report from October 11, 2025 to October 24, 2025 in the amount of $1,862,989.69. Wastewater treatment plant digester gas blower procurement. 2025 pole testing contract award. and Washington Recreation and Conservation Office, Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program, match contribution correction. Any questions, comments, or a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, comments or questions? All right. Anyone opposed? So we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. So we do have 2 public hearings. They need to start at 6:30 or after. Because Greg is here and we were going to try to have our lawyer available as well if there are questions that need to go to the lawyer, I'd like to move up item J1, that's the Bonneville Power Administration load following contract, post 2028 item. If there's no objection to that, then we will go to item J1. And I'm going to turn it over to Director Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I am on page J1 of the council packet. And I just wanted to refresh council's memory. So this did go to the UAC, Utility Advisory Commission, on October 14th, where it did receive a favorable recommendation to council. And then the summary tonight is staff is seeking city council approval to authorize the city manager to sign the Bonneville Power Administration BPA provider of choice contract. The BPA has been holding a series of workshops and listening sessions to determine how to structure the wholesale power contracts for the next contract period ending September 30th in the fiscal year 2044. The end of the current BPA power contract is October 2027. BPA's goal is to have executed contracts by the end of the calendar year 2025. This proposal directly aligns with strategic focus area number 2, citywide resource optimization. A new funding for this, a new wholesale power contract will be incorporated into future cost of service studies. And the recommendation from the administration is to approve the BPA provider of choice contract and authorize the city manager to sign all contract related documents, to administer the contract, and to make minor modifications as necessary.
So moved.
Thank you. All right.
Second.
All right. Do you want to speak to your motion, Latricia?
No, it's a 20-year contract. I did have one question with the contract. I know in our capital facilities transportation improvement plan, we have a project in there, potentially a community solar microgrid. How does that fit into this if the city moves forward with that in the future? Is there an issue, or is there an ability, like if we generate extra electricity, it could be sold back? Is that part of this, or?
No, so that's a great question. Appreciate you asking that. Within the agreement, and I can let Greg allude further if necessary, but I believe we do have an annual 5 megawatt allowance for alternative energy. It's not specific to solar. Our area, it would be solar, but it's specific to renewable energy, up to 5 megawatts. So we would have the ability to do that. The benefits for that, it gives us some ability, some wiggle room within that agreement. So if we have an allotment of power, depending on development that came into the community, that would allow us, having that solar on there would help us with that allotment for other customers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from Amy? Go ahead.
Just to clarify, that this contract is for future rate discussions and changes, not any of the rate changes that we have already discussed recently in council.
That is correct. Yeah. So the agreement that we just did is up to the start of this contract. This would be for the next one going forward. So we have not done a COSA that would be part of this agreement yet.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. I will just say that I had a couple of questions during the UAC meeting that I think, just in case anyone else has them, though they may not be council members, that I appreciate it. I've followed what's happening with water resources in terms of power generation on the Colorado River, and how some of the reasons part of the reason they're having issues is they've used bad data. And I was pleased to hear that BPA does regular average assessments of flow, so that we have relative assurance that the data in terms of how much power they can actually provide to their customers is pretty accurate. So I just thought that was important to know going into a 20-year contract. So with any luck, that will be very true. All right. Any further comments or questions? Okay, then we have a motion to approve the BPA provider of choice contract and authorize the city manager to sign all contract-related documents, to administer the contract, and to make minor modifications as necessary. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Greg. And I don't know if Ryan even made it in, but he's also free. Thank you to him and for his work on this with you. All right. Well, it's not 6:30 yet. So let's go to the Clallam County Hazard Mitigation Plan update, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Sharp. That's item H1 for anyone following along.
Good evening, Mayor Dexter and council members. Tonight you are being presented with a resolution to adopt the 2024 Clallam County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan, which serves as our community's roadmap for reducing the impacts of natural and human-caused disasters. The plan identifies hazards that pose the greatest risk to Clallam County residents and its jurisdictions, including earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, landslides, wildfires, and it also outlines actionable strategies to minimize those risks and enhance community safety. The City of Port Angeles has participated in this regional planning effort since 2004, and this last update represents a significant advancement from the 2020 plan. The 2024 update includes new hazard mapping for coastal flooding, earthquakes, and landslides, integrates wildfire interface risk assessments within the city limits for the first time, and provides a comprehensive evaluation of critical city infrastructure, including water, wastewater, transportation, and emergency services systems. These improvements allow us to better prioritize mitigation projects that strengthen resilience, protect essential services, and safeguard our residents. Adopting this plan also directly supports the city's 2025-2026 strategic focus areas, specifically Focus Area 1, Community Resilience, and Focus Area 2, Citywide Resource Optimization. It advances our commitment to proactive disaster preparedness, strengthens regional partnerships, and ensures the city remains eligible for future federal hazard mitigation grant funding opportunities. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions from council or a motion to approve? Amy, go ahead.
I'll do both. I'm going to move to pass the attached resolution formally adopting the Clallam County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update for 2024.
Second.
All right, Amy, do you want to ask your question or speak to your motion?
I would love to. Thanks for asking. Well, I was going to suggest that Chief Sharp highlight some of his favorites from the 1,900 pages of this document. But I'm going to highlight my favorites, and I would like to just suggest that everybody take a look at it. It's a huge document, but it also identifies some new hazards for our area since 2020, which I thought was really interesting. And not to be a downer, but there are 7 new hazards for our area. And it talks very specifically about our actions for that. And I thought it was also very neat that it actually ranks the probability of these hazards or disasters from happening. And so it really has some really interesting information in there. And I would suggest you guys take a look at it. And also I'll throw out there, if you have any other favorites you want to talk about, please do.
Well, I would just add that it was a long process, several meetings, but we had great stakeholder input throughout the process. I think my 2 favorite pages are 54 and 55, where it charts out every action ID, mitigation action description, whether it's new or it's if it's a previous mitigation strategy. who owns it, what department would, ultimately take ownership in the mitigation process, provides a timeline, whether it's ongoing, short-term, mid-term, or long-range, and then what hazards it addresses, and then finally, funding sources that could potentially be available to the city through grants to help mitigate the costs.
Thank you. Lindsay, go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you, Councilmember Miller, for reviewing all 1,900 pages. I guess a question I have for Chief Sharp or others is what does this change for us as a city in regard to our long-term planning, things we weren't anticipating or haven't been talking about as a deliberative body?
Well, that's a great question. I appreciate the opportunity to answer it. I think when you compare the 2024 to the 2020 and previous editions, the addition of wildfire risk assessment and mitigation strategies, it's the first time in 2024 that the city of Port Angeles was recognized as having wildland-urban interface areas within the city limits, which opens the door for us to pursue potential recommendations for building materials, for firewizing or firewise recommendations for a community and wildfire mitigation strategies. It also, and this might be more geared for Director Curtin, but it also updated the flood maps for the city. And in comparison to the previous flood maps, we actually have less flood area risk than previous maps had showed. And a lot of that was due to the fact that the wildfire mitigation areas, those became more pronounced because we moved away from, we moved into accepting the DNR wildland urban interface mapping, while the flood maps were updated with FEMA. And so those were available to us in the process of going through the assessment of the flood risk for the city of Port Angeles.
All right. Any further questions from council? Latricia, go ahead.
I do like, again, we continue to make sure that we put drought as a hazard on here. It's not new. It was in the 19 plan also, drought, wildfire. But I guess I'm wondering, do we have the urban forest management plan? Was that developed? It states in here as an action to develop an urban forest management plan to assess and monitor forest health, including disease pests. I was just curious. I'm not sure if it's been done. It would be nice to also have on here, or maybe an appendix to it, or an update of the table before it gets sent off, to include what was completed in the 2019 plan. I mean, if you just look at this, it just says that was in the 2019 plan. It says ongoing, medium term. It'd be nice to have a column that says this was completed, like the EOC. You know, it's not completed, but we're in the, I think the RFP phase. And so to me, that's pretty darn close to being complete in reality. I also like the IT stuff in here. Thank you for focusing on IT and protecting our the city and citizens from any risk associated with cybersecurity, things like that. And also the special populations, vulnerable populations in here. I really like that. So those are my comments.
Thank you. All right. Lindsay, did you have another comment? Your hand is still up. I just wanted to make sure I didn't leave you there.
No, I forgot to take it down. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. If not, we have a motion to pass the attached resolution formally adopting the Clallam County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan update for 2024. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right. Hearing none, are you opposing?
Well, I'm just wondering if to amend it to include that, what was completed in that, or can that be done separately?
You'll need to do it separately because we already have the motion that we're voting on. I think that's probably better. Yeah, since I already called for the vote. Let's just do it that way. All those in favor of the motion, please, no, sorry. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And you would like to try for a motion?
Right, I'll make a motion for staff to provide an updated, let me get to what it, to update table 5-2, City of Port Angeles mitigation actions, to include a column that identifies actions that have been completed.
Okay, I'm gonna say your motion died for lack of a second. But we can have Chief Sharp give us an update again in the future. How about that? Okay. All right. So we have item I1, which staff recommendation is to continue, but I will turn this over to Scott really quickly to speak to it.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. Yes, so I1 is the Treeline USA designation, which is the part of the Arbor Day declaration related to city utilities. So I have begun looking into that. There's 5 primary steps. There are some cost ramifications, and that's kind of what I'm looking into. I do think it's something that we likely will be able to pursue in the future. I don't think it's something we're likely going to do in the next 12 months with this current budget. It does have cost impacts, and I'm not prepared to give the presentation tonight, but on looking at it preliminary, I think what I'm going to attempt to do is to generate some cost efficiencies over the course of the next year that might assist with paying for the costs that are associated with joining this. Is likely the path that I'm going on right now. So we are already doing multiple steps that are part of it. We already do a tree giveaway. We honor the day. We currently employ an arborist that is active in the area. So we're already doing many of these steps already. There's some cost factors where the utility has to have a small charge to assist with the purchase of trees and essentially paying for the program that would touch every utility customer. And it's kind of looking at those things and hash out what that is. It's not a huge cost. I want to say, I think it was like 10 cents an account or something like that. But I'll have more and present that to you at the next meeting.
Thank you. Do we need a motion to move it? Do you want a motion?
Council, because a motion
Yes,
got it here, I think that's probably appropriate. And so we would appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Amy?
I would like to suggest that we table the presentation to November 18th, 2026.
A second.
All right, so that was a motion, not a suggestion.
It was a motion. And speaking to that, just I love the information. I thank you so much for getting into it right away. And also, I think you're right that we're really not in a place to take on more budgetary changes. And so maybe your team can look into it and come back to us in a year.
Right, Navarra, go ahead.
I'm going to vote against this motion because I think I would like to know, I certainly would like to know what the information is and what the costs are. And I don't, no offense, Scott, I hear what you're saying, that there might be some large costs associated with this. I'd like to know exactly what those are. And I think that waiting a year for that is just egregious. It sounds like I mean, we can all read a website. I think it's something that we should really be thinking about. And if we're prepared to do this, if it makes sense for us to join in a year, I think that's fine. But I think that we need to decide that, and we need the relevant information much sooner than a year from now to determine whether or not this is something that we do want to move forward with or table. But we can't make that decision a year from now if we don't have the adequate information before then. So I'm going to be voting against this and voting for the recommendation in the packet.
Thank you. Let's see. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate Director Curtin working on this. The issue I've had is that as we celebrate our Tree City USA status, we use the expenses for the electric utility tree trimming as justification for the Tree City USA designation, when in fact the Arbor Day Foundation that provides us both those certificates has a different certificate, Tree Line USA, which is for utilities, like power utilities. So we should be applying that to this other designation because we are both a power utility as well as a city. So it's important that we, that we have both certificates, or at a minimum that we don't say the expenses we're putting toward what should be Tree Line USA or actually our Tree City USA designation. That's been my beef for 7 years. So to try and maybe find some middle ground, I propose, well, let me explain it first. I hear that there's necessarily more time, and I also see this not as an urgent matter that requires action, in November in the heat of budget time. It might require some budget updates. It might require some COSA updates. With that in mind, it makes sense to, put a longer timeline on this than just next meeting. At the same time, I think it would be good for the council to give direction more than what we already have. And please stop me if we've already said, please pursue what it would mean to get certified, or like that is what council would like to do. So I'm going to make a motion to try to get us toward direction from council so that staff are more certain that the research time makes sense. So I move to amend.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I move to amend the main motion to strike the date and request staff to bring back at a future meeting a presentation on steps required to get Tree Line USA certification, and a motion or a motion to recommend from council staff pursuing that certification on behalf of the city.
Second.
Okay, so can you send me that? Because I lost it after bring back at a future meeting.
Yes, I can. And I apologize. I did what I always encourage people not to do, which is shoot from the hip with a long amendment. So my apologies there.
Okay, so if you can send it to me, I can read it again. Are there questions or comments on the proposed amendment? Amy, go ahead.
My biggest question is I didn't catch the end of it, so that was my hesitation in seconding. And I do support the change in the date. That's fine by me.
All
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to wait for Lindsay's message and then I will read it, and then we will vote. Or we will have time for more questions if people have questions after I see it. After we see it.
Since there's no discussion, me typing this while everyone waits is probably not going to work very well. I can repeat what I believe I said before.
Okay.
Okay. So I made a motion to amend the main motion, striking the date, and
to strike the date and
request staff to bring back a presentation and recommendation on whether to pursue Tree City USA certification.
Presentation and recommendation about whether or not to pursue Tree Line USA designation. Should have taken shorthand. All right. So we have a proposed amendment. which is, as was just read, to strike the date of the main motion and request staff to bring back a presentation and recommendation about whether or not, bring back to a future meeting, a presentation and recommendation about whether or not to pursue tree line USA designation. Are there any comments or questions about that? All right. Anyone opposed to the proposed amendment? Please state your opposition. All right. Thank you. We have a new main motion. And the main motion is to continue the motion on the table to a future, to continue the motion on the table and request staff to bring back at a future meeting a presentation and recommendation about whether or not to pursue tree line USA designation. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we will go backwards in the agenda then and get started on our public hearing. And that is item F1. And I'm going to turn it over to Manager West. Do you want to start?
Mayor, we'll start with Director Carrizosa.
Okay. Good evening, Director Carrizosa. Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. We do have a presentation prepared for you this evening on the 2026 revenue sources and the property tax levy, which we have combined into one presentation, and we are hoping to be able to combine that public hearing as well, just for some efficiency. So we are bringing that up, if you'll just give us one moment.
It's so long, it won't load. I'm just kidding.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this evening, we will be going over some of our revenue guidelines that we consider when we're going through our 2026 budget and that we go through each year as we're preparing the budget. And then we'll do a citywide overview. We'll look at revenue projections by funds. And within kind of that category, we'll also break off a little bit and take a look at the property tax levy and those expectations for 2026, as well as some of the specific calculations for that levy and what can be expected for our community. And then one last look over our 2026 budget schedule, and then there'll be time for public hearing and questions. So looking at our revenue guidelines first, there are a few RCWs that are related to the budget. And the first is that our preliminary proposed and balanced budget must be presented by the 31st of October for our community's review, as well for our city council review. And that proposed and recommended budget has been available on the city's website since October 10th. And then second RCW related to the budget is the revenue sources presentation public hearing are a state requirement. And so we're required to go through each revenue item that's been included in the budget, as well as some assumptions for changes. And within that, for the coming year budget, we are going to go over the property tax increases. This is required as part of that RCW. And so our revenues do have a number of guidelines, requirements, and restrictions that are in place as we're preparing the budget each year that we must keep in mind. And so while revenue is one of the most important pieces of the budget, because without revenue, spending cannot occur, we do have to keep that in mind. We're very fortunate that we have a number of revenue sources, and each of those revenue sources does have very specific spending requirements. This is especially important when we're considering the spending in each of these funds and in each of these areas, because that revenue must cover those allowable expenses. And so we do have to break the budget out and determine if we have enough revenue for the expenses that are in the budget, not just as a whole, but specific to each of those revenue sources. which can create a number of challenges when we're trying to look for and locate funding needs for those different types of spending options. Additionally, the state auditor's office will review our revenues each year and ensure that we apply them appropriately to our spending. Any misuses of revenue will result in an audit finding each year. So it's important that we consider that and that we keep that in mind. And so within that revenue collection that must be used for the purposes in which it's collected, there are some exceptions. And so that's primarily related to general tax. So our property tax, utility tax collection, and general sales tax collection. There are a few other miscellaneous tax collections within the general fund that can also be used for any purpose, but generally these are the only areas that can be used for anything. So when we are looking at any kind of subsidies to other funds outside of the general fund, these are the revenue sources that we're referring to for those subsidies. And so the general fund is the only fund that is allowed to subsidize other funds. And so you might recall from our work session on the 28th that we only have 2 subsidies in our 2026 budget, and that's in our street department and for Medic 1. So no other funds can pay for services that are not related to each of those funds for those purposes. And so, for example, the utilities cannot support the general funds. The utilities cannot provide funding to the general fund unless it's for services that have been provided to the utilities. And so those are the allocations that we do each year. Those are tracked separately and charged appropriately. And so we do pick those charges apart and make sure that we are allocating those appropriately. Additionally, no special revenue funds can pay for any other services that are not related to the collection requirements. And so, for example, the lodging tax funding cannot go into the general fund for any purpose. It has to be used for the reasons that are outlined in the RCW for kind of that heads and beds approach. And so our city policy does direct a conservative approach to forecasting revenue each year. And that's important because we do not want to plan for revenue that will not cover our expenditures. And so we are very conservative and cautious when we are building that revenue sources within our budget. Our current economic indicators and high inflation have also been considered and factored into our 2026 budget. And so while our revenue sources are cautious, staff did utilize a realistic approach to prevent some unnecessary cuts in the budget in a few areas. And so these are pretty selective areas that we'll go over as we're going through each section of the budget here. And so our revenues to date are meeting and in many areas slightly exceeding our budget expectations for the year. And so we did have a slower start to our year than what we anticipated. If you might recall from our budget goals work session where we were a little under our budget projections for the year. And so we are seeing that kind of rebound and it is starting to exceed the budget expectations. And so you'll see that within our revenue outlooks in 2026, primarily in the areas of taxes and permit fees. And then there are some reductions planned for state share revenues. And while overall we are seeing some increases expected for grant funding, particularly for our capital projects, in our operating areas, we're seeing some reductions for grant funding. So we'll go over that in just a minute. And then finally, I do just want to note that the use of reserves is not considered a revenue source. However, for our budget years, we have included them in some of the slides that you'll see next. So for 2025 and for 2026 on those budget lines, you'll see a use of reserves. And this is because council must authorize the use of those planned reserves. And so we're demonstrating to you what that looks like in each of those funds and what we anticipate that use will be. In some instances, we're designating for reserves. So we're saving for a large project, or we're putting aside special revenue funds such as REAP to build up that fund and make a transfer for a capital expenditure. And then also use of reserves can also be used for, primarily we use them for our capital projects. And so we build those funds up and we use those reserves each year in order to smooth out the utility rates within the CFP. And so we'll move into a citywide overview of our total revenues for all city funds. And so these will be the funds combined. And so So overall, we do have planned about $188.9 million, including the use of reserves for capital needs in 2026. Overall, that's an increase compared to the 2025 amended budget of about $25 million. And that's largely due to the use of reserves that's expected, as well as total grant revenue planned, primarily for transportation projects. We do have increases for charges for services and one-time transfers for capital needs as well that are expected in 2026 that are also contributing to that increase. And so we're just going to break this down by each of those categories that are included here in our revenues, starting with our taxes. So we have a citywide increase of about $1.1 million planned in 2026. All sales tax collection types are seeing increases in 2026. And that's based on what we're seeing for 2025, as well as trends from prior years. And this is one area of the budget as we move along, particularly in the general fund for general sales tax collection, that we were a little less conservative to help balance the budget because of some of the inflation and affordability that we see there. And so we have about a $136,000 increase for transportation benefit district tax and about a $376,000 increase for general sales tax collection. And that does include assumptions for changes that were made by the legislature this year for allowable tax services related to primarily advertising and IT services. And so our permit revenue is also seeing an increase due to actual collection to date, as well as expected fee adjustments that are in line with the CPI index. This will be the first changes for those adjustments since 2023. We also have an increase planned for total grant revenue collection in our citywide funds, and that's about $17.1 million in transportation projects, $2.7 million in governmental projects, and $1.6 million in utility capital funds combined. Our charges for services are largely the result of allocation increases, so charges to other funds for services provided, and increases for utility revenue collection. And so these are those rate increases that occurred at the last meeting. In our miscellaneous revenues, these are primarily revenues collected for investment interest earnings. We also have rentals and leases, as well as internal service charges here. And largely changes here include increases for transfers to the self-insurance fund for employee benefits and for liability insurance. And then in our non-revenue category, we have a $700,000 repayment of the interfund loan between the water and solid waste utilities. And finally, looking at our other financing sources, we have transfers from utilities to their corresponding capital accounts. And so each utility has its own capital account, and they do have a flat transfer that occurs each year that's outlined in the CFP, and we have carried that forward from the capital facilities plan. Those are exactly as they occurred and were approved by council in that plan. There are also a few one-time transfers that will occur that helps to prevent rate increases. And so that includes a $1 million transfer for the light ops building and about a $1.8 million transfer for water projects combined. So as we look at our all city revenue here on our pie chart, we can see that a little less than half of the revenue citywide is from charges for services. And so the majority of that is from utilities. So about 83.2% of this category comes from utility charges. Internal charges, so charges from one fund to another, make up about 12.7% of this. And so those two items in total represent 95.9% of all the charges for services citywide. Taxes make up approximately 11% of revenue citywide in 2026. Largely, that's your property sales and utility tax. That's 75.4% of this category, and transportation benefit district tax at 8.3%. And then our intergovernmental revenue makes up about 15% of all city revenue, and that area is largely for our grants. And then you can see our reserve use makes up about 14% of the total $188.9 million. So moving into our general fund, this is our main operating fund for the city. It accounts for financial activities that are associated with the traditional government. So these are a number of departments within this fund. So city council, city manager's office, the finance department, community economic development, police, fire, the public works, administrative and engineering divisions, and the parks and rec department. And so as we look at our general fund revenue in total, you can see it's a much different picture than what we see for our all city revenues. So we have about $27.4 million in revenue collection forecasted in 2026. That's about a $140,000 increase as compared to the 2025 budget, or roughly 0.5% on the increase. The largest area for the increase here is in our taxes. So that's $824,000 in the general fund. That does include a 1% increase as allowed for property tax of roughly $52,000. We have a $376,000 increase to our general sales tax, a $372,000 increase for utility tax that resulted from the proposed increases to the approved increases for the electric and solid waste divisions. It also does include a slight increase from the electric utility tax from our industrial electric customer. So there is more usage there than what we expected in 2025. And so the corresponding utility tax has also been increased there. And then within this category, we also had a $30,000 increase for criminal justice sales tax collection as well. Our permits area for licenses and permits increased about $250,000. That's due to actual collection. And again, that a proposed increase to meet CPI. Our grant revenue, which is under our interdepartmental revenue in our general fund, and our state shared revenues are both proposed to decrease in the general fund in 2026. So those grants are in supportive positions that are not expected in 2026. And then we will go over the state shared revenues in just a moment. There are a number of them, and they're all for different purposes. And so we'll go over those, but in total, they have decreased for 2026. And then charges for goods and services are almost entirely due to allocated expenses to the utilities for work performed by employees in the general fund. So we have a $273,000 increase planned in the general fund in 2026. And then finally, looking at our miscellaneous revenue, we did have a decrease that resulted from opioid settlement funds. So in 2025, we had revenue collection that was occurring for those because some of the parties associated with that settlement were paying some of their settlement amounts in advance or upfront. And so we had a large influx of revenue in that year. So we were pulling from revenue. All of that revenue plus the revenue from prior years that was unused is sitting in a restricted reserve account because it can only be used for the purposes of Operation Shielding Hope as approved by City Council. And so this year, rather than pulling it from a revenue, it is coming out of that restricted reserve. So it's a technical use of reserves, but it is not part of our unassigned reserves. It is coming from that restricted reserve. And so looking at our general fund revenue, taxes make up the largest portion of revenue in this fund of about 63%, 94% of which is coming from property sales and utility tax combined. Charges make up approximately 27%, of which 87% is coming from those allocations or charges to other funds. In this area, we also have rentals, planning fees, and cemetery fees are also included. And intergovernmental funds make up about 3% of the general fund revenue. And again, that's primarily grants and our state shared revenue. And then permits make up about 5% of general fund revenue. And then I do just want to take a minute to note that our three major tax collections of property, sales, and utility tax, as well as our allocations or charges to other departments combined, comprise about 83% of the general fund revenue in 2026. So the majority of the revenue that is in the general fund comes from those charges and from those three primary tax sources. And so as we break down our tax revenue category first, again, that's 63% of the total general fund revenue in 2026. It's about $17.2 million. Looking at our utility tax, that's 32.5% of this category, or $5.6 million combined for each of those utilities. We also have about 30.8% for our sales tax. That's about $5.3 million. And we have 30.6% of this category going toward property tax, which is about $5.2 million. And so the final areas for our tax revenue, we have 2.8% of this category is for criminal justice tax. So that's almost $500,000. This is a 0.1% sales tax that's collected citywide and has to be used for criminal justice purposes. And so it is tracked within our police department for those purposes. We also have telephone tax, which is about $265,000 planned in 2026. It's 1.5% of the tax revenue category, and it is a 6% tax on select phone services. And so they're very specific on what is allowed to be collected in this area. And so basically anything that runs through the internet could not be charged here. And so we have seen a large change in this area over the last several years. However, for the 2026 year, we're not proposing any changes. And so it will stay the same as 2025. We think we've hit kind of that plateau, and we're hoping it'll stay within that $265,000 range in the future. And then we have a few other taxes that make up about 1.7% of this category, or $290,000. That includes primarily leasehold excise tax, but we also have gambling tax and commercial parking tax within this area. And so we'll take a quick look at our utility tax, and you can see for our water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities, we are not proposing any changes for our 2026 year. That's because we have multi-year COSAs in place for each of these utilities, and we don't anticipate any revenue increases in this area that are substantial. And currently those are tracking to come in on budget, and so we have left those the same in our 2026 year. Our electric and solid waste increases are relative to those rate adjustments that were driven by the COSA, as well as changes for that industrial electric customer. And then looking at our utility tax percentages, all utility tax rates are set by council with the exception of electric, which cannot exceed 6% by state law. So that is set at a maximum allowable of 6%. Our water, wastewater, and solid waste collection utilities all have a 10% tax rate, and our transfer station and stormwater have an 8% rate. And so looking at our sales tax distribution, so within the city limits, sales tax collection is 8.9%. Of that amount, the city receives approximately 1%. That's our general sales tax collection amount. So when we're talking about the general amount, it's this 1%. Within the 1%, the city's actual amount received is about 0.84%. Because the county receives about 0.15% and the state receives 0.01% for administrative charges. And so what the city receives of that 1% is actually 0.84%. That's what's in our general fund under our general tax category. The items that are outlined in yellow are City of Port Angeles tax collection. The remaining items are either county or state collections. And so the state does receive 6.5% of that 8.9%. And then the county receives approximately 0.9% of the tax. Within the areas for what the city collects, we have affordable housing at 0.1%, our transportation benefit district at 0.3%, so 0.2 of that stays within our transportation benefit district capital fund and supports capital projects, and 0.1% goes into our street department in support of maintenance and operations. And then our emergency communication, that's 0.1%. That is actually a countywide sales tax collection that is passed through to the city for the operation of the PennCom 911 dispatch center. And so looking at our sales taxes by category over the last several years, there are a few major categories that the city does collect on. So we have retail trade, construction, accommodation and food services, wholesale trade, manufacturing, information, and then just kind of other services there in dark blue that make up kind of those other smaller categories outside of those larger areas. And so if we look at our sales tax trends for our 2025 year to date, because we're in a 2-month lag, those include amounts that are collected as of July. And what we are seeing on our trends is that our online sales have remained high. That's something we've seen since about 2020. And that is remaining steady and consistent, as are all of our main categories. We are seeing an overall slight increase compared to 2024 collection in 2025. So we're just going to take a moment to go through the property tax levy. And so we'll start with some of the limitations for our property tax. So the city does have a statutory limit of 1% of the full fair market value of the assessed valuations. And so that's the assessed valuations in total. That is not by property. It is the total amount of the assessed valuation inside the city limits. The amount cannot be more than 1% without being voter approved. Within that, the state limits that the levies cannot exceed $10 per every $1,000 of assessed valuation. And so as we look at our levy rates, the state can't exceed more than $3.60. Local districts cannot exceed more than $5.90. And then other districts have a 50-cent limit for a total of that $10 for every $1,000 of assessed valuation. There are also senior taxing districts, of which the city does fall in. That's important because if we are running up against that $10 limit, there is an order in which those are applied. And so being a senior taxing district does kind of put us in that threshold there. Counties, including their regular levy and their road districts, are also senior taxing districts, as are PUDs and port districts. And so if we look at what this means for the city of Port Angeles for our levy limits, and that's for our 2026 year, we have a full limit of about $3.54. Our regular levy is $3.31 approximately. And because the city has a fireman's pension fund, we also have the ability to collect 22.5 cents on the levy for the fireman's pension specifically. So our total limit there of the $3.54. We currently do not levy anything for fireman's pension. That would require voter approval because it would exceed our 1% total allowable. If we look at our 2025 levy, so the current levy, we have a $1.60 levy limit. And that's because we can't exceed the 1%. So we had an available capacity of $1.94. And that would be if the city wanted to consider a levy lid lift or something along those lines. That's the amount that we would have available to us for something of that nature. In 2026, we estimate that our total levy amount will be $1.59, so leaving an available capacity of about $1.95. And so this next graph demonstrates the 2025 Port Angeles property tax amounts. And so this is just within inside the city limits. So there was a total collection of about $9. There's for the city of Port Angeles on the far left side, we have $1.60. The school district, $2.73. Port of Port Angeles for about 11 cents. The state received $2.42 on the levy. And Conservation Futures, about 2 cents. Clallam County, 76 cents. The library, 29 cents. The hospital, 75. And William Shore Pool, 32 cents to make up the total of the $9. So that leaves about $1 left on the available capacity inside the city limits. And we are using 2025 numbers because the levies have not yet been certified and we're not aware of what that will look like for the other districts. And so this just demonstrates what's occurring inside the city limits in total for property tax levy. And so there are a few more limitations within our property tax collection. So state law allows for a property tax increase up to the implicit price deflator, or the IPD, or 1%. And it's the lower of the two. So in years, if the implicit price deflator is below 1%, let's say it's 0.5%, that's the amount that we're allowed to take without special circumstances. So the implicit price deflator for personal consumption of expenditures is published by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and it's used to determine inflation in the economy. And so, as I mentioned, in years when the IPD falls below 1%, it would be necessary for the city to pass a resolution declaring substantial need in order to levy the increase of the full allowable 1%. It's also important to note that a 1% increase is directed in Section 2.13 of the city's financial policies. And so if we look at the implicit price deflator for 2025, you can see it came in at 2.44%. So our maximum allowable increase in 2026 is 1%. Typically, looking at the history here, you can see that typically it does come in over 1%, but there have been years where it's been a little below, and we have passed that resolution of substantial need. And so what is the value of a 1% increase to the city of Port Angeles on that property tax levy? So it's about $51,863.35 in total. Within that, we are allowed to take new construction values that occurred in this year, but were not a part of our assessed valuations last year at this time when the county certified those. Those are levied at the current levy rate, so $1.60. We have a current new construction assessed value of about $20.4 million. And so that's about $32,801.11. That's not tied to that 1% amount, but will be folded into the assessed values for 2026 going forward. We're also allowed to take additional items, things for state properties, for assessed valuations, for improvements. Typically, we don't see change in this area. If it is, it's not very much, but we are also allowed to take refunds. So typically what we see is new construction and refunds within our property tax levy. Currently, refunds are estimated at about $40,000 for the city in 2026. That's a little higher than what we've seen in the past. And they do vary each year. Also included here when we're looking at those assessed valuations, and what you'll see in just a moment, are the preliminary numbers that have been received by the county. So those amounts have not yet been certified. The county has until the end of November to certify the levy. And so there is a possibility of some changes. It's usually not very much. So what we see on these estimates are usually pretty close to what our final certifications are. But it is important to know that they can change. And so for our property tax collection in total for 2026, we are estimating about $5.25 million. So a very slight increase. You can see that 1% as compared to our 2025 budget. You can also see since 2018, the 1% increase each year. We have not increased our levy more than 1% in a number of years. And so it's just demonstrated by our actual collection here and our estimates. And so the assessed valuation is linked and tied to our levy rate. So it's important to understand how those two are connected as we move forward and estimate the costs associated with the levy. So we have about $3.3 billion in total assessed valuation in 2026. And again, these are preliminary numbers. That's about a 2.9% increase as compared to the 2025 year. And so what occurs when we're looking at our levy rates is that as our assessed valuation goes up, our levy rate goes down. If the assessed valuation were to go down in total, then our levy rate would go up. And that is to keep the 1% allowable increase. And so we're keeping that static and having a 1% increase. The way we do that is to adjust the levy rate each year. And so we've included some examples for yearly costs to homeowners here, and these are just examples. So what that looks like for a $250,000, $300,000, and $350,000 home. These do include only the City of Port Angeles property tax rates. This doesn't include any of those other items that we saw a few slides ago. And you can see that if your assessed valuation were to remain the same, your total amount paid in tax would actually go down because the levy rate is being reduced. Again, we can only collect the 1% increase in total. However, typically what you see is a little bit of a change on your assessed valuation. So just as an example, we've taken a home valued at $300,000 in 2025. And so if we apply the average assessed value increase of 2.9%, in 2026, that home would be worth about $308,700. And so we can apply a simple formula to determine what that would mean on the yearly increase for this homeowner. So we take that $308,700, we divide it by 1,000 because the levy rate is applied to every $1,000 of assessed valuation. So we take 308.7 and we multiply it by our estimated levy rate of $1.59 for 2026. And the total tax collection for that year, specific to the City of Port Angeles, would be $490.83. You might recall from the last slide that in 2025, that amount was $480, which means the increase in 2026 would be approximately $10.83. And so that's for the entire year, so about 90 cents a month. And so if we move into our next category for general fund for licenses and permits, we have, that is about 5% of total general fund revenue in 2026. We have planned $1.4 million. In this category, 72.4% of this category is building permits. We have $993,800 planned. And permit revenue collection must offset the cost of providing the service. So we cannot over collect on our permit revenues. And so that's very important because we do carefully calculate that to ensure that we're not over collecting as compared to our spending plans. Within licenses and permits, we also have telecable franchise fees of about $126,000. That's about a 5% fee for those franchises. That's 9.2% of this category. The police department also has leases for their radar repeaters, concealed carry permits. In total, those are $118,400 planned in 2026, or 8.6% of this category. And then we do have business licensing at about 5% of this category planned for $135,000 in 2026. And so this business licensing does only include phase one expenses tied to these revenues. And so that's changing the 2 part-time code enforcement officers to 1 full-time position and support for downtown resource officer. We do not estimate that there will be any additional funds to move forward with any phase 2 options at this time. So the revenues included here would only offset that phase 1. And that was discussed in our budget goals work session. So we wanted to be ensure that we followed up with that, that none of that has been built into the budget for phase 2. Our intergovernmental revenue, largely this is grant collection in this area, is 3.3% of the general fund revenue in 2026, about $900,000. 28% of this.
Sorry for interrupting. I lost audio. I don't know if that's just me.
Let's see, how can we determine? If you are an attendee, can you raise your virtual hand just so we know that you can still hear? That's if you're in the WebEx. Okay, I think it's just you, Lindsay, but he can't hear me say that. This happened before too. Yeah, can we send him a message to let him know he's the only one who can't hear? And maybe this is bad timing, but I want him to be able to hear your presentation. So can we take a 5-minute break to troubleshoot and then come back and we'll pick up the presentation? Okay. He might be texting me, but I don't have my phone on. So, okay, thank you. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break and get him back in the audio and come back and pick up on slide 34.
My apologies for that. It should be working now.
Can you hear me?
I heard you. Thanks, Kate.
All right. We'll go ahead and get started again. Lindsay, can you confirm that you can hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, slide 34. Director Carrizosa, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll pick back up with our intergovernmental revenue, which does make up 3.3% of total general fund revenue in 2026. It's about $900,000. Of that amount, 28% is for state and federal grants. So this is an area that I mentioned where we saw a reduction. We have $256,000 planned for personnel offset for capital projects and for our Stone Garden grants that cover overtime in our police department. So Stone Garden is about $47,000, and we have about $199,000 from various different grants for personnel time that will be offset from those capital projects for the work on those, primarily within our Public Works, Engineering and Administrative Division. And so grants do have specific guidelines for use, so we do follow those based on each individual grant. Looking at our state shared revenue, we are expecting to see some decreases here. And so we have on this slide here, 27% of that is for criminal justice. That is a state shared revenue. That's $248,000. That includes revenues for high crime, violent crimes, special programs, and marijuana. So those are based on estimates from the state, as are all state shared revenues. And so the state provides that. They are typically paid on a per capita basis. And so in 2026, the per capita amount for each one does vary, but we do have 20,440 that will be applied to that. That's based on our population. That's from the Office of Financial Management. And again, those do vary by revenue type. In some instances, the state shared revenues are also specific to other factors. And so just looking at the criminal justice, for example, that's based on crime rate in many instances. This is important because this is one of those areas where we did see reductions in our state shared revenues. And that is because in 2026, the high crime qualifiers that were used by the state, the city is no longer eligible for some of those. And so we're seeing a reduced amount for the state shared revenue, particularly for high crime and violent crimes, as well as some of our special programs. We do not meet that percentage threshold. And then each of the state shared revenues do have specific uses. And so looking at our criminal justice, for example, those all go into our police department for the specific nature of each one of those collections. So for those programs. So for example, working toward lowering crime rates. Within our intergovernmental revenue, we also have some other state shared revenues. So liquor excise tax and profits, as well as fire insurance premiums are considered state shared revenues. Fire insurance premiums, we are expecting about $52,000. And for our liquor excise tax and profits, about $295,000. And we also have about 6% of this category going to, or about $50,000 going towards city assistance. And so in order to receive city assistance, the city's assessed valuation for property tax must be below the state average valuation. And so this is kind of an offset for the changes that occurred when the state moved to the 1% levy limitation. There used to be an additional levy for streets. And so if your assessed valuation is below the state average, there's an additional amount that can be included. We've included only a partial amount for the year. Those are updated each year in October. The city did not qualify for the 2025 year, and so that will go into part of 2026. So we're only anticipating part of the year that we do expect that we will be close to those thresholds, and so we have assumed that we will meet those thresholds in 2026 partially. And so for our charges for services, about 27.2% of the 2026 general fund proposed budget, about $7.5 million. And largely these are allocations or Interfund charges for services that are provided by personnel within the general fund. That makes up 87% of this category, or $6.5 million. 5%, or roughly $400,000, are for plan check fees and zoning fees. We also have facility rentals, including cemetery fees, at about 4% of this category, or $286,000. Our fire inspections fees make up about 3% of this category, or $235,000. And then we also have a few other charges for services that are relatively minor in total collection. That's $22,000 total for range user fees, PEG charges, and memberships. And so just finishing up in our general fund, we've included a chart here that demonstrates some of our major revenues, not necessarily by category. This is just in total. So you can see the $27.4 million in total collection. You can see each of those four major areas that I mentioned previously for property tax, utility tax combined, sales tax, and for interdepartmental charges for services. So moving into our special revenue funds, these account for and report for the proceeds of specific resources that are committed to purposes other than debt service or capital projects. And so these are areas in state law where we're allowed to collect for specific needs. We are required to track those separately in a separate fund to ensure that those are being utilized properly in accordance with each of the requirements by law. And so our first special revenue fund that we're going to look at is lodging tax. And so this is a collection of about 4% tax on lodging, which does include hotels, motels, short-term rentals, campsites, and any services that are for overnight stays. We do have a planned increase in our 2026 budget of about 11.2% specifically for the hotel motel tax, combined with our investment earnings about 10.6%. This is our largest budget amount projected to date and does reflect the continued high collection as compared to budget estimates. It is still conservative because we recognize that the revenue sets our yearly expenses. And so these are the event grants and agreements that are provided to our community each year. And those will become a general fund obligation if the lodging tax fund does not collect as we expect. And so we are pretty conservative in this fund for that reason. The amounts collected in excess of expenses are placed in reserves each year and then are applied to the following year's budget in accordance with the policy that was approved earlier this year. They must stay in this fund. They are restricted for use for lodging tax purposes only in support of operations and capital needs for tourism facilities and for promotion under the RCW. In our street department, we have a $2.1 million budget planned in revenue for 2026. That is a slight decrease due to some of the planned expenses, as well as excess reserves that were built up in the street department from 2024. So we have the 0.1% of 1% from Transportation Benefit District. That's for maintenance and operations in this fund. We are expecting to see an increase in 2026. That's based on current collection on the 2024 collection as well. So we have about a $45,000 increase here. We also have from the state shared revenue, the motor vehicle fuel tax. It's seen little change year over year. However, there is an estimated increase of about $26,000 for the 2026 year as set by the state. And then if we're looking at the street related transfers, this is the subsidy from the general fund. This was where this budget was reduced because of the reflection of the Transportation Benefit District tax increase, as well as the excess reserves that built up in 2024. We were able to reduce that burden on the general fund and keep the street fund at a 25% projected fund balance for 2026. In our PENCOM fund, primarily collection is in the form of taxes. So we do have a countywide sales tax, and that's for the operational needs that's passed through the city. We have about an $88,000 increase planned in 2026. Of the total amount of tax increase, 25% of that is held at the county for capital purposes. And so that's that capital tax that we are not anticipating an increase on because we only include amounts in the budget for years when we're going to spend that tax that's held over at the county. So we currently have $50,000 planned in our budget or in our CFP for that, and that's been translated into the budget. We're also expecting a little over about $1.8 million from user fees from each of the agencies that utilize the PennCom services in Clallam County. That does include the city as well. So we have user fees and city user fees included here. Overall, that's about a 9.4% increase as compared to the 2025 budget. And then we have decreases included for grants that we do not expect in 2026, as well as one-time reimbursements from other agencies for services that were provided. And since there are quite a few different revenue collections within PennCom, we have provided just kind of a historical overview of what each of those revenue collections look like. So you can see we are year over year, we do have sales tax increases in this area, and we are projecting that to be a little more in line with what we saw in 2024, and then the increase for user fees primarily. So our real estate excise tax, we have included 1 and 2 here. So each of these collect a 0.25% of tax on property sales. We are planning a 2% increase in 2026 for each of these areas. And so these funds are restricted. They must be used for capital projects approved in the capital facilities plan and for special allowances included in the RCW. Currently, the city utilizes these just for capital needs. It's one of our few revenue options that are available for those capital projects. And so we do fully utilize this fund within our CFP. So looking at our housing fund, we have included the 0.1% collection for affordable housing, as well as the sales tax credit that came from House Bill 1406. So these are the majority of the revenue that's planned in 2026 in this fund. It's about an 8.1% increase to collection planned in the sales tax area. Also, in years when we have a community development block grant or CDBG grant, this revenue is received and accounted for in this fund. It's been a few years since we did receive a CDBG grant, 2023, and so there are no changes planned in 2026 for that. Within this fund, all of the revenue that is planned here must be used for affordable housing purposes as outlined in the RCW for the sales tax credit and for the sales tax collection. And so we have a couple of other special revenue funds. The first is our Business Improvement Area Fund. This is an assessment that's collected from downtown businesses. We anticipate about $43,600 in revenues in 2026. We currently have a contract with the Waterfront District, and so this is a direct pass-through. Our Code Compliance Fund includes interest revenue and transfer from the general fund in support of code enforcement. So moving into our enterprise funds, these are funds that have activities for which a fee is charged for goods or services. And so these are our business type funds, including our utilities for electric, water, wastewater, stormwater, solid waste, Medic One. And then we also have harbor cleanup and conservation in this area. These funds must be used for the operational capital needs of the utilities. And any time spent assisting other funds is charged directly. So there are some utilities that do work for other utilities as needed, and those are directly charged. So within our electric utility changes included here are in line with our cost of service analysis that was approved. And it's based on use and cost to provide each of those services. And so this really just demonstrates how those rates impact the budget. So what you saw in the COSA were rate changes. And what you're seeing here is how that applies to the budget and what those changes look like for each of those categories. And so you will see changes included here in each of the customer categories because the COSAs are very granular and we're applying those costs where they should properly be. Changes or shifts where you're seeing decreases in some areas and increases in others are due to the number of customers within that category or the services provided in some instances not necessarily being needed based on the customer counts there. And so overall, for revenue collection here, we're seeing about a $2 million increase. And then each of these areas, we've included a graph where you can kind of see what the changes year over year for the last few years have looked like. And so you can see the largest change in the electric utility up top there in the light gray, and that's our industrial transmission customer, where we saw that significant increase starting in our 2024 budget, reducing in 2025, and then a slight increase in 2026. In our water utility, as was mentioned under the utility tax collection, because they are connected based on the total revenues there, we do have a 2-year cost of service analysis in this utility. And so there really aren't many changes that are collected or proposed in this area because we are on the 2nd year. As I mentioned, the collection is coming in as planned for the 2025 year. And so we have not made any adjustments except for to areas that are non-rate revenues. And so that includes our investment interest earnings. Our water utility does have quite a large fund balance because of the National Park Settlement reserves that are being held and restricted for use. And so we are planning a little bit of an increase there for investment earnings. And then you can see that no changes planned from 2025 to 2026, and then the increase in 24 from 25 as those COSAs were approved for the start of the 2025 year. Very similarly, in our wastewater utility, we are not anticipating any changes in areas that are for our rate revenues because of that 2-year COSA. So we do expect a grant change for our pollution prevention specialist. And so we're shifting some of the costs from the stormwater fund into the wastewater fund. And so we are expecting about a $70,000 increase from Department of Ecology for a grant to cover that position. And then we are expecting a little bit of a decrease in our investment interest earnings because we have used that reserve for capital needs. And so there was less to invest there. So looking at our wastewater utility, our residential and commercial wastewater customers are provided here. And again, you can see similar to the water utility, the increase in the 2025 budget with no change planned for 2026. Our solid waste utility, we've included our transfer station and collection rates here. These changes are in line with our cost of service analysis that was approved at the meeting in October. And again, are based on use and cost to provide the service. And so you're seeing this translated into the budget. We are also expecting a decrease in grant funding for our transfer station facility in 2026. So the city did receive a grant for operational needs that we anticipate will only continue through the first quarter of 2026. And so that's where you're seeing that reduction there. And so breaking each of the transfer station and collections down on these graphs, you can see the increase starting in that 2026 preliminary budget. And then again in our collections area as well. Our stormwater utility is on a 3-year cost of service analysis. So similar to water and wastewater, we're not anticipating any changes in our charges for goods and services. That's the stormwater fee. We are expecting a slight increase for investment earnings. And then the decrease in our grant funding is from that pollution prevention specialist grant that was mentioned. So it was shifted into the wastewater fund from stormwater. So you're seeing the reduction in stormwater and the increase in the wastewater fund. The expenditures associated with that grant have also been shifted. And so they are washing. In our Medic One utility, we do have a few changes. And so we have our transport collection is expected to increase. So that's our ambulance services on the second line. That did help offset some of our Medic One fees that were approved. And that transport increase is based on the actual collection received. And then we do have our Medic One fees because of the COSA. Also, we're looking at an increase there. Our Medic One write-offs, as we typically, as you see more transport fees, you also see a higher volume of write-offs, unfortunately. And so we are anticipating that. That's something that we are seeing trending as well as we've increased the number of transports. And so we've increased that in our budget as well. Our recurring transfer is the amount from the general fund. That's remained the same for a number of years. We are not planning any changes in the 2026 budget. And then the last item here is for our community paramedicine grants. And so we do have a number of grants that are expiring in December of 2025. The city does continue to apply for grants, and we are hopeful that we will be able to continue a lot of the great work that's already in place. The grants that are included in the budget do maintain our existing program. And so any additional grants would allow for pass-through funds to other organizations or potential expansion of that program like we've been able to do in the last few years. And so notably here for Medic 1, you can see the increase for both the transport costs for the Medic 1 fees and then that kind of flattening and reduction for the community paramedics and grants. And then our last two enterprise funds we have for harbor cleanup. Primarily revenue here comes from insurance reimbursements and grants. There are no changes planned to harbor cleanup in 2026 as compared to 2025. We do still anticipate about a $1.2 million grant and insurance reimbursements for the 2026 year. In conservation, revenue primarily consists of incentive funds for power purchased. And so those increases and decreases are based on the estimated needs for power. And we do not have any changes planned from 2025 to 2026. So looking at our capital funds, and so these are used for the acquisition and construction of capital facilities or projects. Revenues typically occur in the form of transfers from other funds and from grants. So we have a transportation benefit district, we have a governmental capital fund, and then each utility has a corresponding capital fund. So we've kind of combined those all together. These are outlined in our capital facilities plan in detail. However, for rolling up into the 2026 budget, we'll start with our transportation benefit district fund. Largely changes are for grants, and those are based on planned projects as outlined in the CFP. We have 15 grants planned in 2026. For those transportation projects, it's about $17.1 million, about a $10.4 million increase as compared to 2025. And it's really not uncommon for us to see those changes significantly year over year. Any unspent money, including any of the grants that are associated with those unspent funds, would be carried into the 2026 budget from 2025. So that's something to note as well. Our sales tax includes that 0.2% transportation benefit district tax that's specific to the projects outlined in the CFP. We are projecting about a $90,000 increase in 2026 for the sales tax. And then that grant funded projects are used to promote the strategic plan goal to increase connectivity in communities. And so just a few projects here, there are a number of them. And again, they're all detailed in the transportation improvement plan. We have our N Street reconstruction, Ray Street, first and front pedestrian improvements, the Laurel Street stairs, and the waterfront trail improvements. So our other capital funds, that includes our governmental capital. And so those revenues largely include those transfers from the real estate excise tax special revenue fund that I mentioned. In years when the Lodging Tax Committee approves the use of capital funds, there would also be a transfer from lodging tax. And then the general fund also makes transfers for each of the departments that are associated. So parks, we have public safety, including fire and police, and then some general government projects as well. So we do have expected grant revenue in 2026 of about $2.6 million for the Ennis Creek Fish Barrier project. We also have $50,000 for the Ennis Hook boat ramp and $16,800 for body-worn cameras. And then for our utility capital funds, these are transfers primarily from the other utility funds. These are set by the capital facilities plan based on need that we've outlined for the projects that we've identified as critical needs. Those are included in our cost of service analysis and averaged so that we have a flat amount going into these funds each year to keep the rates stable. Within the utility capital funds, the solid waste and wastewater funds for capital also include a surcharge for debt as well as the debt payments. That's where we track this. And so we do have the revenue going into those funds as well. We do have some expected grant revenue in 2026 to include $1 million for the electric vehicle charging stations and $100,000 for the Valley Creek Stormwater Park and $525,000 for land acquisition. And then we've grouped our final funds into kind of this other fund category. We have fireman's pension, cemetery endowment, debt service funds, equipment services, IT, and self-insurance. And so if we look at our fireman's pension fund and our cemetery endowment fund, these include interest revenue only. Looking at specifically our cemetery, Ocean View Cemetery Fund, there cannot be any of the revenue used until the cemetery reaches its full capacity. And so we don't expect that for a number of years. And so this fund just continues to build that revenue. Included here is debt service funds for interest revenue on one governmental obligation bond. That bond actually matured in 2025. I've included it here on the slide just for that comparison between 2025 and 2026. But that fund will be recommended for closure at the end of this year. Our internal service funds, this includes equipment services and IT, as well as our self-insurance fund. Our equipment services and IT funds are all revenues come from charges for services or allocations within these funds. So this is the staff time from each of those departments for support of those services citywide. Our self-insurance fund includes transfers for the employee and city portion of medical, dental, and vision insurance, as well as other employee benefits and liability insurance. And so each fund makes a transfer for all of these services. However, the expenditures do occur out of this area for that bill. And then looking at our budget calendar, we have planned for our November 18th meeting, the 2026 property tax continuation of the public hearing. We will be looking at the adoption of the ordinance and the resolution at the same time. And we'll be having our first reading of the ordinance and the public hearing of our 2026 budget. And then we are continuing that public hearing and conducting the second reading of that ordinance on December 2nd for 2026 budget. And then tonight, because we have combined the public hearings for the property tax and for our revenue sources, we are requesting that you open the public hearing on the 2026 revenue sources and the 2026 property tax levy, that you close the public hearing on the 2026 revenue sources, that you continue the public hearing on the 2026 property tax levy to the November 18th meeting, and that you conduct the first reading of the 2025 property tax levy for 2026 collection ordinance. So I apologize for the lengthy process there, but I'll turn the time over to council for questions.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. So if you are here to speak to the revenue presentation we just saw and or the property tax, which was a part of that, this is the time to do that. I have one online. Anyone in council chambers? It's easier to do that first. Same rules as public comment. Name whether or not you're a resident, and it's a 3-minute time. And you can speak to either or both. Go ahead,
Okay,
James.
my name is James Taylor. I'm no longer running for city council, so I don't know what happens there. What I noticed is a large budget increase, say from 2024 of 34 million in terms of revenue. And I noticed a large consumption of reserves to get all these numbers to work. I think the reserves number was 24.5 million. And looking at our reserves, I think it's like a third of our reserves we're proposing to use in this budget year. Now I know we don't use all the reserves that we say we're going to, and so it's kind of confusing when you see the 2024 budget and it says we're going to use $22 million in reserves, and we actually put $1.3 million into reserves. So those numbers are always confusing. But I don't think it's sustainable to always say 13.9% of this current budget is reserves. I just don't see the sustainability of that. And so, it might not be the 2026 budget, but it might be the 2027 budget where we're going to have to start thinking about how to save money as opposed to how to spend money. And, I do think there's savings that the city could go after and maybe get that budget down to, I don't know, 180 million as opposed to 189 million. That's a lot of money. That's $9,400 a citizen. So every citizen in our city, we're spending $9,400. Now, as a citizen, I could sure spend, an extra $200 or $300 that I wasn't given to the city to spend. And as we look across the landscape of our community, there's a heck of a lot of very bright people doing very good stuff that the city doesn't need to provide those services. I know that it was mentioned to future councilman, whose name I've already forgotten, that, you know, any reduction in personnel would cause a reduction in services. But I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I think we're overstaffed for the amount of services we provide. And I think there's services we provide that aren't really necessary. All right. Hey, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in council chambers? Okay. I have one hand online, so we'll go there after this speaker.
Yeah, hi, John Ralston, City of Port Angeles resident. The only comment that I wasn't prepared to make any comments till I saw $500,000 in the proposed money to buy real estate for the city. City owns enough real estate. It don't like property coming off the tax rolls and into your hands. You've got enough real estate. You should be selling an awful lot of your real estate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Susie, we'll go to you. We'll make sure you are unmuted. We'll make sure we can hear you first, and then I will start your time.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. Susie Blake, Port Angeles resident. I mostly was just listening to learn to this presentation. I concur with Mr. Ralston's comment about real estate purchases, but the reason I wanted to comment is some language in the revenue presentation that caught my attention. I by no means think it was intentional, but when referring to the cannabis industry and the cannabis tax revenue using the language marijuana, that word has very racist origins. It's very documented in the different states, marijuana cannabis legalization programs. I did a quick look online, and the state law refers to it over and over again as cannabis, not marijuana. Again, it has very racist origins. When I walked the halls of the state legislature and lobby days in another state with my friends advocating for their children with seizures and their veteran partners that use cannabis, and many of them were Mexican American, that was an important point to them that we not use that racist language. So I would just ask, when we're referring to this industry that employs a lot of people in our community with living wage jobs and generates a lot of tax revenue, that we not use that racist language. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. All right. I don't have any other hands online. So I will close the public hearing on the revenue sources and continue the public hearing on property tax collection. And I'm going to go ahead and read the ordinance and then open it up for council discussion and questions. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, levying regular ad valorem property taxes for collection in the fiscal year 2026 and directing the city clerk to certify said amount to the Board of Clallam County Commissioners. All right. Comments or questions from council? Anybody? Amy, go ahead.
Thanks. I also was curious about the how the cannabis tax comes to us. I think this probably not really a question without some research, but I just thought that was interesting that it was actually not very much. Also, just pointing out that unless I misunderstood, it seems like we are getting less tax dollars because we have less violent crime.
That's correct.
Congratulations, us. Sorry. I think that's it for right now. Other than Director Carrizosa, I'm sure you always live like a year in the future. It's going to be very confusing for you.
All right. Other council members wish to speak to property tax or revenue sources? Okay. Well, we don't need to spend more time on it. We will talk about it again on the 18th. If you do come up with questions, please ask them. It is helpful, rather, to ask them in advance so staff can be prepared to answer them well at the meeting. And we will move on to J2. And that is another proposed for a future meeting item. And I will go to Director Kurt.
Yes, thank you. So members of council, my apologies. I had a staffing availability issue this evening. So we are respectfully requesting continuation to the November 18th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, second. Did you catch that? Was Latricia second? Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay, so we have a motion to continue the signal controller final acceptance to November 18th. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. All right, I'm not so far off because we're at council reports with 6 minutes. So, all right, let's start with John.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of stuff's happened since we gave our last council report. So a few things. I was able to attend a candlelight vigil for the young man who passed away a couple weeks ago at Eddie's Hook. It was very heartwarming and sad, and being a high school teacher has had a tremendous impact on students in the community, not just ours, but the Lower Ellicott tribe. So it was an honor to get to be part of that event. My heart goes out to the family. I've also been having lots of meetings, so I got a chance to go to the fire department, meet with Chief Sharp, and learn about what they're doing up there. And I hope to come back there soon it's like I can't see it all in one day. So I'm going to go back up there and be able to learn more about what they're doing and their needs, and meet some of the hardworking first responders we have down there. So it was a pleasure. Thanks for the time. I was able to do a ride along with Deputy Chief Vieta after our last council meeting, and so that was very enlightening. So I was happy to be able to do that. It was nighttime PA, so hopefully I can go back in the daytime sometime when I am not teaching classes. I've been, and then beyond that, just trying to learn, listen, attend events. I'm going to be attending the Veterans Day celebration at the high school on next Tuesday, and with my wife, who is also a veteran. So we're honored to be invited to that. So we look forward to going down there and celebrating our veterans who deserve nothing but admiration and respect for everything they do. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Amy.
Thanks. I'm having a little bit of a brain fart here. I swear I've been doing stuff, but I don't have too much of an update. I've been drafted to help the Behavioral Health Advisory Board to review their RFP, so that's coming out for the county, and just continue to meet with and learn about how our community is experiencing the changes in SNAP benefits and health insurance premiums and what that looks like for our local services. So it's been sort of a downer and positive in that, this community really is doing a lot, and there are resources out there as needed so far. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Navarra.
Well, I feel like what I've really been spending most of my time on is preparing for our big LTAC meeting extravaganza next week. Our scoring of applications are supposed to be due tonight. And we had what feels like 1 million, but I think is probably about 40 applications, might be just 30, but it is a lot. And I think we had a lot of recurring folks and a few new folks as well. And it's always nice to see new applicants and new events, new organizations who choose to apply. Certainly it can be a barrier, but I think we've done a lot to help streamline that application process, at least from the scoring end of things, which I know I really appreciate. And so, of course, stay tuned for the next meeting when we'll hopefully, fingers crossed, have an update for you about how it all went. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is, it's been in the PDN quite a bit, and the leader, is that, the city of Port Townsend has just conducted a sweep of an encampment. And I think as we move into the winter season, it's worth talking about our homeless neighbors and community members, and how I think our city has consistently tried to act with compassion, particularly with the sort of multi-team disciplinary response on helping getting people into temporary, motels or warming shelters, what have you, that I know Councilmember Miller has been really involved with, as has our police and fire departments, rediscovery. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I think sort of in light of what other jurisdictions have been doing on the peninsula, I think it just reminds me how important it is to really think about our actions and how we're treating those around us, including our most vulnerable at very, the darkest time of year, the coldest time of year. I mean, it was horrible being out in the rain and the wind today. So it makes me really proud to know what our city's response has been, particularly in the winter. And I just think it's always worth saying that I hope we continue to act with that same kind of kindness and compassion, particularly when we know that there will be friends and neighbors, likely having pretty adverse health outcomes and potentially dying in some of our neighboring jurisdictions because they haven't acted with that same level of kindness.
Thank you, Navarra. Lindsay.
I appreciate those words from Deputy Mayor Carr. I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Drew.
I have to go back through my schedule since we skipped council reports last time. So towards the end of last month, I did go to the PA Chamber meeting. I'm the current city council rep for that. I did get to participate with Mayor Dexter for the groundbreaking celebration for the number 4 locomotive. That was very rainy, and it would have been nice if someone had a pop-up tent for us to stand under. But otherwise, it was very nice. It was a good showing. A lot of people that I got to talk to, and a fun little steam train brought in from like Tacoma, I think, that the guy could ride on, and it was actually really kind of cool. It's a miniature that's still like 3 feet long. With that, I also did get to towards the end of last month, I went on an ORCA inspection. Clean air inspector, guys. I totally forget ORCAA acronym off the top of my head is. But I and several people were invited from the county to be able to go to attend the Port Angeles hardwood mill inspection. They passed flying colors. The idea was ORCA, I guess, is trying to get local municipalities, agencies and whatnot to participate and kind of show what they're doing and what the inspections consist of, and kind of get more people just knowledgeable of what's going on. So it had less to do with a surprise inspection, which it wasn't, of Port Angeles hardwood mill, and more to do with us kind of see how ORCA operates. That being said, it was fun because I don't know when the last time I went to an active mill site was. So being able to see how that's currently run, how that's all set up was very educational, and I really enjoyed the ability to do that. Coming up tomorrow, I do have a Limited Peninsula Tourism Commission meeting. So that's always fun to find out what we've got going on. And then almost immediately after that, it rolls right into our quarterly recompete meeting as well. So I'll have back-to-back city meetings. And so my council report next time should be fairly decent because there's also a Veterans Day ceremony at the high school that I believe all of council has been invited to. I'm assuming not everyone has agreed to go because otherwise it would have been posted as a special meeting. But that is everything I have right now.
Thank you, Drew. Latricia.
Yeah, we had a Clown County MRC meeting, always a really great discussion. Our members are actively involved, continuing great presentation on, or an update on Pinto Abalone, the increase in tanker traffic and oil spill response. And again, those are all issues that are very important to the Clallam County MRC, along with toxins, taking water samples and monitoring toxins within our shoreline and nearshore area. Also participated in the North Olympic Peninsula. Let me get it right so I say it right. North Olympic Peninsula Energy and Environmental Resilience Conference. That was 2 days. That was really great to hear about what's happening in the community or industry of resiliency and renewable energy resources, and how cities can do things a little bit differently. So attended with Lindsay with that, and we made some contacts there. Also attended with Mayor Dexter. We went to the Customs Border Patrol, also with Chief Smith, and went to have a tour of the facility, and we had a nice discussion with staff there. Also attended the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting. And there was a great presentation on that one about the new law about recycling, and the city will be a recipient, well, we'll have to go through that process. And once we start going through that process, hopefully we'll be able to see our solid waste charges. Because it's supposed to be paid for by the manufacturer, and so hopefully it'll bring down costs in the future. I'm not going to guarantee how much, but the anticipation is for recycling only, though. Recycling. So good discussion, but they did start talking about the ILA or interlocal agreement, and that did concern me when they started talking about that. Let's see what else. I know I did something this week too. Well, I'm just going to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I won't repeat the things that I've done that other people mentioned I was there for. But I did, I was here, what Drew didn't mention, because he was also there. We were here for the Arbor Day celebration and tree distribution for it's the third year, right? So I was able to read the Arbor Day proclamation again for that group, and watched a lovely tree planting demonstration by Courtney, which I thought was a really nice addition to this year's event. I was not a recipient of a tree, but if I ever do get a tree, now I know some things I did wrong last time we had a tree that we planted. And then also did another ride along with Deputy Chief Vieta, and want to just let the council know that I will be representing the city in Victoria for their Remembrance Day celebration on Tuesday. And we have historically, and again, purchased a wreath as a part of that ceremony. So I go up and have gone up and get to lay it on I forget, it has a name, but I can't remember what it is, but it's a memorial. And so being part of that ceremony, and I'm really hoping that last time I was there, it was raining as hard as it was just a few minutes ago. My boots got wet inside. So I'm hoping that it's a little drier this year. But that's where I will be on our Veterans Day. And I think it's just worth noting as we think about impacts to, certainly this is not a hardship impact, but The Veterans Day ceremony is at the high school this year because the Coast Guard, because of the shutdown, cannot host public affairs events. And so they're not able to host this year because of the shutdown. I know it's a special day for people to go. I appreciate the high school stepping in and providing the space, and for the organizers being flexible and shifting gears. So that is all I have. Manager West.
So Mayor and Council, I have two things for you this evening. We plan to be closed for Veterans Day on Tuesday, November 11th to celebrate Veterans Day. And then also just want to thank Council that was able to attend the Street Tree Program event. I think it's important that we take the time to celebrate community and economic development, public works, and parks that work so hard to ensure that we planted 74 trees this year. And that brings our total for the past 3 years to over 400 trees, which is really impressive and really a great start to our street tree program. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to our second public comment period. And we have some folks here who've been waiting very patiently. So I'm going to call on them first. So we'll start with Cheryl. And if you just come up to the lectern and if you can just state your name. Okay, that's right. You've been sitting for a while. And you can state your name, whether or not you're a resident, and then the timer. The lights will keep track of your 3-minute time. And if you are joining us virtually and wish to make a comment at this second public comment period, please raise your hand now. Go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Willie, and I love being a resident here. My husband and I retired from Seattle because I fell in love with this area when I was a child. We moved here in 2016. We live on West 3rd Street, and we have a wonderful new neighbor, the Peninsula Behavioral Health low-income housing apartment building. And that's why I'm here. We're concerned about the safety of our traffic control in our neighborhood. We're going to essentially be doubling the amount of families that live on our block. And I'm not sure if everybody knows where the Safeway store is on 3rd Avenue. Well, if you're really in a hurry and you want to get to the waterfront, you turn west onto 3rd at the Safeway, and then you kind of stop, and then you start speeding up to get to Cherry, and you make a free right down to the waterfront, and it's a great route. But as a result, pedestrians are increasingly unsafe. And if we're adding 35 families with children, we need more stop signs. We need 4-way stops. We need traffic control. We need an awareness of the impact that this wonderful change is going to have on our neighborhood and the safety of our neighborhood. There have been so many car crashes on our street that are not being reported to the police. My car has been hit. My neighbor's car has been hit. My other neighbor's car has been hit. My other neighbor's car has been hit. So any help you can give us, we will notice and we will appreciate. And thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Andy.
Hi, everybody. Andy, I'm a resident also on West 3rd Street here. I do have a partial comment. I guess that's part of the agenda. I do want to commend the city for competing and winning this RCO WWRP grant for the Race Street improvements and competing well and getting that money. I appreciate that project. But I'm mostly here to talk about what Cheryl was talking about as well. Really like to, plead the city to look into installing a stop sign or a traffic circle at the intersection of West 3rd and Oak Street. Just last week on October 27th, speeding vehicle collided into our friend and neighbor's work truck. We parked on the street and totaled it. This is the third time their vehicles have been hit, parked on the street past few years, but their experience on 3rd isn't unusual. Multiple neighbors of ours, as Cheryl said, who live between Laurel and Cherry on West 3rd have been sideswiped or run into. It's clearly we have a lot of people that use 3rd to bypass traffic lights and get through town. And the lack of a stop sign roundabout or speed bumps in that stretch allow people to speed heavily, and we see it every day. I know the city was just awarded a WashDOT grant for traffic circle and curb improvements, and these are going to other intersections that are based on collision data. But we just want to encourage the city to take a second look at 3rd and Oak. There are kids that live and play on this block, and the PBH building going in at 2nd and Oak, probably takes another or warrants a second look at traffic control there. So we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Rodney. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You're just on the list.
Hi, I'm Rodney Caldwell. I'm a citizen in Port Angeles. My work truck got totaled. That's the 4th time it's been hit. It's got a big steel box on it, so usually it takes a beating, but this time it didn't survive it. 2017, a friend of mine, her car got hit. A few weeks later, that same car got totaled. She got a new car. This was when my daughter was born, 2019. That car got hit. You can sit outside of my house and it's hilarious to watch people drive by there at like 45, 50 miles an hour. It's not just the Cherry Hill downstrip, they come in off of 8th and they can skip all those lights, bebop through there, and those yield signs too. People don't know how to drive anymore. They see those things and you'll have a big standoff at an intersection with them or they'll just blow right through them. So I just think some solid stop signs there would at least be a step in the right direction, fairly cheap, inexpensive, pretty quick to throw in. We do have a deaf girl that lives there. She cruises around the blocks. My kids live there. We have other kids that all take the bus and rip up through there, and it is a speedway. Thanks.
Thank you. And Dana. Okay. All right. And then anyone else in council chambers? We got 2, maybe 3. Okay, we have 3, and then we have 1 online.
So my name is James Taylor. I live on West 3rd Street, and I somehow have encountered, I had a car totaled there. She would have hit and ran, but she screwed up her car so bad it couldn't escape. Then I had a project van that I was going to turn into a camper, and somebody went and wiped that out. The neighbors behind me, their car got sideswiped, and they weren't able to fix it. So if you go down the alley, you can see this black car that has the left side of it creamed. Thanks for waking me up the other night. We had a nice chat in the street. There's something that's got to happen with that. I think a little speed light might help, where it says, here's your speed and you got a ticket if you're doing 10 miles over the speed limit. I've had this conversation already with folks in the city, but I don't know what it is about 3rd Street. I realize, that's where the needle exchange is, and that's where the midnight liquor sales are down at Safeway. But these people that hit me before were drunk. The people who hit Rodney's truck were drunk. I mean, it was entertaining. We saw, a guy get cuffed up and hauled off. But, this work truck, that's Rodney's living. Mine was, my hobby van that was going to be my camper. Well, now I'm out shopping for a new hobby van. But that street's terrible. All right, thanks.
Thank you, James. Mike?
Good evening, Council. My name is Mike Doherty, resident of Port Angeles. A little over 2 years ago, I came to Council 4 different evenings, used my 3 minutes to talk about the value I thought of the Lincoln site, one to be used for some kind of adaptive use, potentially probably affordable housing. But I'd like to segregate the two. The building itself is a historic building and the property itself. My comments tonight are not as a member of the Board of Directors of the North Olympic History Center, just as an individual resident. So the board appears to be right on the verge of listing the property for sale, and the 6 lots on 8th Street for sale. The only expressed use for the revenue from the sale is the demolition of the building. It doesn't really address some of the potential of the site. It's a real short-term fix. And over the 2 years since my chat with council, when my wife and I have traveled, I've gone to numerous pre-1930s masonry schools that have been converted to cultural gems within communities, elder housing, retail on one floor, housing upstairs, affordable housing for fire, police, veterans, all sorts of adaptive uses. And I think it still could happen here. But once those 6 lots are sold, the whole parcel that remains will be diminished in value because they're not saving ingress, egress rights. There's a number of shortcomings I see in the listing agreement and the potential to diminish the value for a future use, say for affordable housing, which I think is a great site. The site itself is literally priceless in our lifetime and future lifetimes here because of the valleys and the bridges. 8th and C will always be a principal north, south, east, west intersection. The property values are going to be very high in future years, but the savings to developers, whether it's local government, private developers, or some partnerships, are amazing. Developers tell me it's likely at least 30% savings because of all the utilities, curbs, sidewalks, trash, broadband, power, water, they're all at that site. So it's a huge savings rather than building multifamily dwellings further out 18th Street or some other alternative that we prefer in Port Angeles so far. So I'm hoping the city would reignite a little interest, maybe ask about a first right of refusal, try to have some continued negotiations for the larger parcel. The only stated problem that the board has said at the History Center is they have a hard time finding storage for their artifacts if they were to sell the whole parcel. I'd like to see the city maybe help them find that, and I'd be glad to help work on it. If you haven't, and I'm very grateful, city manager, 2 public works directors, some of the council visited the site, so thanks for that. And I hope there's some chance to save that as a commons in Port Angeles for the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. John.
Hi, John Ralston and my good friend Mike Doherty. And we have 3 kids that are, his 3 kids and my 3 kids are about the same age. Anyway, this is another thing. I don't want to see the city touch Lincoln School in any way, shape, or form. You've already been burned once. Don't do it again. You own enough property in town. It's a money pit. So stay away from it, please. Want to encourage you to do anything as you can to help platypus move about the Amazon, and hopefully we'll find out about the sidewalk additional fee program that's proposed in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else in council chambers? Okay. We'll go online to Susie Blake. When you are, I'm gonna get my timer ready. And when we know we can hear you, I will start your timer. Maybe. You know it was unmuted. There we go. No? Okay.
Hello?
Yes. Okay, I can hear you now.
Sorry, I swiped the wrong thing. Thank you. Susie Blake, Port Angeles resident. Couple quick things. Speaking of Lincoln School, did the study that the city spent $50,000 on to see about the feasibility of doing things there, did that get completed, and is that available to the public review? I'm just curious because that money was spent after other entities that had already studied that situation. So just curious. Thank you for all the community members that came and spoke about 3rd Street. I don't live close to there, but I live in the same neighborhood and I walk that area a lot. And it's definitely an issue. Stop signs would be a great idea. Traffic patrol would be a great idea. Please, let's stop pretending like we don't have major drug trafficking happening there with drug trafficking buyers and sellers coming and going and contributing to the danger. So that's all. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Susie. All right, anyone else? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you all, and we will see you on Tuesday the 18th.